So today we are going to talk about Enys Men, which takes me 3 goes to pronounce it properly. Or Mean. How do you pronounce it properly? Maine. That's it. I would just call it Enys Men, and then I'll get into trouble. We have a panel that has Mark Jenkins, the director, Mary Woodvine, the actress, and Denzil, and I'm going to do this on purpose, Monk, no, Denzil Monk, the producer. He said no one could mispronounce his name. I went, you haven't seen me yet. Hold my beer. And how many of you managed to see the film? Amazing. So this is Mark. This is your new film after the grand success of Bait. I like to do this quip. That's a joke between me and Mark. That his film Bait was just set in a spirit of Brexit. So he had to go and make a film that was in the year that Britain joined the European Economic Community, as it was then. Wow. So he's just obsessed with us leaving Europe. But first, I'd like to just, in case anyone hasn't seen the film, in your own words, how you would describe the plot.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't describe the plot. And as reading some of the reviews, I don't know whether there is a plot to discuss really. But I can give you the log line for it if you want.
That will do.
It's a lost Cornish folk horror. But some of the PR people don't want us to use the word lost. So a Cornish folk horror. And I don't really like using the word horror. So Cornish folk. And that doesn't really make sense. So Cornish.
That sounds good. Sounds good. Also, what does the title mean? That could be a good way of explaining what the film is a little bit about.
Yeah, so it's called Enys Men, so spelt men but pronounced. Good camera. I've got that camera. It's pronounced Maine, M-A-N-E, but spelt M-E-N. And Maine is a contraction of the word menhir, which means standing stone or long stone in the Cornish language. And Enys means island. So the exact translation is island stone, but in Cornish the words are sentence orders around the other way, so it means stone island. And I was really conflicted about the title because we really wanted it to have a Cornish title and the Cornish language to play a part and be quite central in moments of the film. But also I really wanted the word stone to be in the title to sort of nod towards things that are influences like Children of the Stones, Stone Tape. I like the word stone in the title. So, but in the end we just thought actually we're going to go with the Cornish instead of the English. And it gives us this enigmatic title that everybody pronounces wrong. And why would they pronounce it correctly?
Exactly. Why would they?
Yeah, it's a real trap to fall into.
Mary,
yes.
You were in Bait, and now
Yep.
you're working with Mark again. Can you
Yep.
tell us a little bit about the attraction of working with Mark and why you agreed to be in his pictures?
Well, I agreed because I'd been saying to him for quite some time when he was looking for somebody to play the part of the volunteer. I kept saying, well, so-and-so would be really good, but you are living with a woman in her late 40s, early 50s, who is an actor, who could be doing that. And he was saying, no, you can't be in it, you can't be in it. So I even helped him try and cast it at some point. And eventually he said, yes, you can. Of course, it's your part. Well, for me, obviously, I read it and it was about a woman on her own. and all I wanted to do was to do it and to be part of it.
I think I got to a point where I realised that I'd clearly written it for Mary and admitted to myself that I'd written it for Mary. And I didn't want people to think it was just because Mary was my partner that's why I was putting her in the film, and I did say to somebody, I don't want to be accused of, and what I meant to say was nepotism. What I said was necrophilia. and and they
That
said to me
actually
that,
explains the plot.
and they said they didn't think that would be an issue.
Okay, for those that haven't seen the film, I'm going to give you what I think is something that can situate you maybe in the film a bit more. So the film is a beautifully shot story about a woman who we discover is living on her own on this island that no one can pronounce the name of. There is a menhir that's on the hill, on the mountain, that's a stone. She starts doing things that feel a little bit otherworldly, but we don't know why. Dropping stones through this great hole of a well right down into water. Sometimes we hear it, sometimes we don't. Listening to the sounds that happen. And then she's kind of haunted, even though you don't like using the word horror, but haunted by her past and the future all at the same time. How's that for a plot?
Good.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
That's what they pay me the big bucks for. Denzil, can you tell me a little bit about working with Mark and how you got this project off the ground?
Yeah, sure. So Mark and I worked together for quite a while now, and I think the idea came out whilst we were in post-production on Bait, and we were driving to Falmouth one day, to Falmouth University. We were both teaching there that day, and Mark said, I've got this idea, and pitched it to me in the car, and sort of talked for this hour-long drive, and talked through the story. And then I was thinking about it all day, so then on the journey back, I told him what I thought it was about. No mention of plot, just lots of random thoughts about time and standing stones and things like that. And then so from there, Mark wrote the script really quickly, and we were just really keen to get it made soon. So we just thought let's just see who we can bring together to get it made quickly and in a very similar fashion to Bait. And so we worked with the Sound Image Cinema Lab at Falmouth University, who supported other projects in the past. And because of the Cornish mining, which is a big part of the landscape, and I was going to say a big part of the plot, but we've discussed there isn't really a plot. So it's part of the environment that the volunteer lives in, and is dropping a stone down the mine shaft. The flowers grow in the contaminated ground of this old engine house. So we spoke to the Cornish Mining World Heritage Site, and they came on board as well, and then Film 4 sort of plugged the gap and made it possible for it to all happen quite quickly. And it was all going to happen very quickly, and we were just speeding up to pre-production, and then the pandemic hit, so we were sort of pushed back by a year, which was frustrating in some ways, but it also allowed some other ideas to develop for other things. And then once we got going with it, we actually filmed it during lockdown under strict COVID protocols, but in Cornwall, where we have a lot of tourists come, it was actually quite advantageous to the shoot, because it meant that this isolated island was properly isolated, because there was nobody else out and about whilst we were filming on the cliffs and the moors.
Amazing. And you didn't mention, but Mark always has a very special technical side. He doesn't want to shoot on his iPhone. He doesn't want to shoot digitally at all. Is that a problem when you're pitching a film like this?
No, not at all. I think it's quite the opposite of a problem. It's a strength. I think one of the great things about working with Mark is he has absolute clarity of vision. He knows exactly what it is that he wants to make and how he wants to make it. And for me as a producer, that's much easier for me to work with that complete clarity of a concept, and the logistics of what's being shot on, and all the rest of it. It doesn't really make a difference. It's just kind of what's right for the film, and with this film, with when it's set, with how Mark likes to shoot, then yeah, it was a no-brainer really.
The film has a very beautiful aesthetic. Can you talk us through how you attained the look of the picture?
Yeah, well, as Denzil was alluding to, I shoot everything on a Bolex, on 16mm negative. The last film was black and white. The big difference with this one is color, but it doesn't alter anything. It doesn't alter the way we work at all. You know, the camera's got no idea what kind of film it's got inside it, so it just, you know, the process is all exactly the same. The only difference was with bait, I hand processed the negative, so we shot, and then I spent 3 months, frame by frame, developing, using developers to process the image. And it's got a, that's why, for anybody who's seen bait, it's got a very inconsistent, impressionistic feel to it, because it's got all of my inconsistencies of process within that aesthetic. With Enys Men, it was always going to be a colour film, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, firstly, I thought if we're going to do colour, then we're going to do a hell of a lot of colour. There's no point. I didn't want to do like a washed out colour. You know, I sort of felt like, it was like the whole movie industry for me. The moment they switched from black and white to colour, you know, just if you're going to do colour, do a fuck of a lot of colour. You know, let's really enjoy it and let's make a big deal out of it. So it was always going to be colour and colourful. The issue with colour is that I couldn't hand process a colour neg. I quite often process colour Super 8, but that amount of rushes for 16mm is just a huge amount of processing, and the colour process is, the chemistry's not very nice, so I wouldn't want to be 3 months covered in that stuff, and it's all temperature dependent. So it's really, you know, with bait, I could sort of, I didn't have to concentrate too much while I was processing it, and there's some shots in the film where you can see where I was barely concentrating at all. But with the colour, you really have to be on it, and so we knew it was going to be lab processed. So Kodak processed the neg, and I knew what they would do. And if, in case anybody from Kodak here, this isn't a criticism, but they want to process all of what they receive perfectly for their artists or clients, and what I want is them to process it imperfectly. So all of the job sheets that we sent off, it was always, you know, don't mess with this at all. You know, and when it was scanned to create the digital proxies that we edited from, it was like, don't do any digital cleanup. Just process it exactly as it is, and all of the fogged ends of the film, I want all of that back. Don't make any creative decisions. Give it all back to us, because I'll use all of those imperfections. And then the other thing I did was pretty much everything I underexposed by 2 stops. And normally, if you do that, you then let the lab know, and they'll push process it a couple of stops. But we didn't let the lab know. They thought they were getting a sort of standard neg, but it was all underexposed. So then when it came to sort of recoloring it later on, I was able to really push it, because we had a thin neg. I had to push it, and all the colours start really popping, and the grain, like some of the grain, you know, especially seeing it on that bigger screen on Friday, even I was like going, oh, it's a bit grainy, you know, really. And that's because it was just pushed so far. And that was my attempt to mess with the negative in the way that I messed with it when I hand processed the bait footage. The sort of the beauty, or however you described it, I think it just comes from, I just want to keep everything as simple as possible. And what's been really great reading the reviews is people constantly mentioning the simplicity of the imagery and saying it's, you know, it's beautiful, but it's this simple imagery. And I think that's always my priority, is just nothing too clever visually. You know, I get more, try and be a bit more tricksy in the edit with portrayals of time, but the actual visuals, there's never really anything, you know, it's pretty functional, I think. And that's, you know, I have influences who lead me that way. And also, I have a camera. On this one we had 2 lenses. On bait we had 1 lens. I had a zoom lens. Anybody who's seen it would notice I'd like to use the zoom lens on this one. And then a light meter a tripod and a bag of film, and that's it. That's the camera kit. And then Colin, who lights everything for us, had 5 or 6 lights, and that's it. So there's a real simplicity to it. I operate the camera as well. So the reason we have such big stark close-ups of things is because, you know, if I need to be close to Mary to interact and to direct when it's needed, or, you know, converse. And wherever I go, I have to take the camera with me because I'm operating it. So that's why we have these big close-ups and very functional aesthetic. And I think it just, if you're not doing anything too tricksy with the camera's not moving and stuff like that, then you then really have to you have to think about what you're pointing the camera at much more, you know, because you're not necessarily gonna reveal something with a camera move or movement within the frame. So for me, it's all about simplicity. I never think of the beauty. I don't want to make, as the old cliche goes, I'm not shooting postcards, you know, picture postcards. It needs to be functional. But I think the beauty comes out of the simplicity, because I hope the viewer can just see that it's sort of, there's an honesty to it, I think, you know, if that doesn't sound too highfalutin, but, you know.
You always sound highfalutin, Mark.
Yeah, I don't know why I apologise for that.
Mary, you spoke about the volunteer. For me, this is the character that kind of, and the haunting aspect of it is someone who isolates themselves, but you can never escape yourself. How did you see the volunteer?
Yeah, very much like that. But she's so self-contained, and there's a scene where there's one person who appears actually in her reality, and he says to her, do you get lonely here on your own? And she says, I'm not on my own. And we've already seen that people do appear, but she's surrounded. She's got herself, and she's got the whole of the life that's already on the island. She's got all the nature, she's got the birds, she's got, just the life, the natural life that's all around her. So she's never really on her own. But I think there is a self-contained, she's decided to take on a job where she's observing as a sort of a nature volunteer, a flower growing on an island, on a uninhabited island. So we know that she's somebody who's already happy within herself, happy to spend time on her own. But I think, like with everything, there's the scene when the guy comes onto the island with her. When I watch that scene, I really like it because I can almost feel her trying to absorb somebody else's physical presence, another human's physical presence, and then he can bugger off again, and she'll need him again when the petrol runs out and she runs out of tea. And that's so she does. She's obviously, like all of us, happy to have time on her own, but I think she does like a little bit of human contact, and then he can bugger off again and she's happy on her own.
And when you were writing in your diary, which was basically almost writes identical things every day, it made me think of the Overlook Hotel and All Work and No Play makes Jack a dull boy.
Yeah.
Did you feel like Jack Nicholson?
There are moments where the characters, everything's slipping away, and she has to bring herself back from feeling like everything is slipping away. So yes, in that way, yes. Although Jack Nicholson doesn't really try and bring himself back, does he? He gives into it.
Briefly.
Yeah.
Very briefly. The film, even before we know what period it's set in, which is quite early, we see the diary, but from the very first frame and the sound of the score, I was like, oh, this just feels like the 1970s. Can you say why you chose 1973 in particular?
Yeah, I've been asked about this quite a lot, and I think the truth is, or what I think the truth is that I like the way. I always knew it was going to be in the 1970s. You know, I love 1970s cinema aesthetically as much as anything. You know, when you see a clip from a film from the 70s, I'm just always hooked straight away, you know. But the 1973, I just like the way it looks when it's written. And I'm really, you know, seriously, I'm really superstitious with numbers, and 7 is a lucky number for me, like it is for a lot of people. And there's reasons why 7 is people's lucky number. 7 appears all the way through the film, and I don't want to, pretend that the film is coded in some wanky number system or anything. 7 is just in there because I love the number 7. But all of the groups of people that she sees are all in groups of 7s, just because it is a lucky number for me. The number 3 is a significant number for me. When I was young, my gran used to always tell me to be wary of the number 3. And I was always sort of fascinated by that. And what she actually meant was, she said this to me when I moved away: be wary of the number 3. And she's a Cornish, West Cornwall, Newlyn girl. And I thought, God, what's this old folkloric thing of being worried about the number 3? It turned out what she meant was, if you're going to live in a house, make sure you're not in a group of 3 in a house, because there's always a majority and there's always a minority. So it was a very practical bit of advice, but it just, I became obsessed with the number 3. I bet you didn't think you were getting this, did you?
No, I didn't. 2's company, 3's a crowd.
Yeah.
But maybe she had a premonition you might be hit by a number 3 bus or something.
Yeah, possibly. So it had to be 1970s, and 1973 was the number that I liked. I liked the way it looked when it was written. In the film, it's not Mary who's writing. It's a stunt hand with a very specific way of writing 1973 that I had in my head. The 7 had to be right. The 3 has to be right. It has been pointed out, along with other things, it might be an accidental nod to a famous horror film that came out that year, and another one that came out with it at exactly the same time as a double bill. That wasn't intentional. For me, it was about the way the numbers looked, which sounds stupid, but it's a visual art form, so we've got to think about the way things look. And
so my writing wasn't neat enough.
no, it was too neat, too good.
No,
I wanted old-fashioned writing, and you're right. Yeah. Your writing is more modern than Callum's, and I knew Callum
that's true.
wrote like an older person.
And Callum's got really beautiful long fingers, and I've got lots of knobbly knuckles.
So there's a continuity error if you want to put that on IMDb. The other thing is, Mary's got a thing. She had an operation on her finger, and she's got a bent finger. Sorry, is that all right?
Yeah, it's fine.
So
I got a bent finger too. Look.
Right. Well, you could have done it.
Yeah, I've got. Have you got Dupuytren's?
No, I just broke it playing
Oh,
football.
right, yeah.
So Callum, who was going to be Mary's hand double, the other reason we have a hand double is so that Mary's and Callum's the first AD. So what we could do on the schedule was, rather than it being too punishing for Mary, once she'd done her scenes, she could go, and Callum could do all the technical stuff with hands, because he was going to be there anyway at the beginning and end of each day. And then a couple of weeks before the shoot, he rang me and said, "I've got a problem." He dislocated his finger playing football, and they put the finger back in and mangled it, and he said you can't straighten it, sort of bent like this. I said, "What hand's it on?" He said, "Left hand." And I said, "Well, that's absolutely ideal." So he broke his finger to match Mary's.
That's a new level of method. When I throw open later on questions, anyone that's seen the film has to name Mark's double bill.
Yeah, 1973 double bill.
Obvious to people that've seen it, especially when I'm going to say with my next question, how did you choose the color of the coat?
Apologies if anybody was at this screening on Friday, because I told this story in the Q&A, but we were talking about costume, and originally it was going to be Mary was going to have blue jeans, obviously brown hair, and a yellow raincoat, and the boatman's oilskin, his jacket, was going to be red, because she kept seeing this red in the sea in the original script that looked like blood, and she could never quite get close to it until finally it comes very close to the rocks, and she's able to sort of put a stick or something into the blood, and it turns out it's this boatman's jacket, so bright red. And I but you start thinking really irrationally in the run up to a shoot, thinking, are we doing the right thing? Is this right? Is that right? You know, because you get to that point where you're going to have to commit. And I thought, Mary, the character can't have a yellow coat. She's got a yellow coat, brown hair, and blue jeans. Everybody's going to be thinking I'm ripping off the costume of Charlotte Gainsbourg in Antichrist. So I said to Denzil, how about we swap it so that Mary's character's got the red coat and the boatman's got the yellow oilskin. So we did that. I thought, that's great. Nobody will think we're ripping anything off now. And then about 20 minutes into the first day of the shoot, somebody's like, is that a nod to Don't Look Now? I was like, you know, people had already compared the way that I worked to the way that Nick Rogue worked and saying, you know, he's clearly influenced by Nick Rogue, and which I was kind of trying to steer her away from and say, oh, no, I'm not. And then I've got a lead character who's walking around with a red coat for the entire film. But luckily, nobody's going to think I'm ripping off Antichrist anymore. Film that nobody's seen.
I have a poster for Antichrist in my bedroom. What does that say about me? Denzil, I'm really curious because, like, we can all call Mark a unique filmmaker, etc., but it's also unique because it seems impossible to get films like his made today. How do you go about getting something like this made, and bait even before?
Bloody mindedness. I mean, which, you know, you can unpack that, but that's what it is. I think, you know, as you kind of go, it goes back to having that clarity of vision. If there's a clear idea of what the film's about, why it's going to be made, and how you want to make it, then it's obviously there are always some small compromises that need to be made through financing, through production, through every part of the process. But as long as those are really, really, really tiny compromises, and the intention is held really solid, I'm a great believer in thinking that if there's an idea and you want to make it happen, then just do it and let reality kind of bend to your will, which is kind of, especially for a film like this where it's playing with bending reality and different sort of ideas of intentions and things as well. So I think that's how you get a film like this made, is by making it. And that was the intention at the beginning, wasn't it? We could spend more time trying to make something bigger, different, go in different directions. But with this, it was very self-contained. With geographically, most of the locations were within about 20 minutes where we all, and 90% of the crew live. In the almost island of West Penwith, West Cornwall, and the process was clear how it's going to be made. There was nothing really stopping us other than a fear of not being able to do it. So we just make it happen.
And I think the word compromise is really key there. You know, the way we work, everything's a compromise. We compromise right from the start. There's so many things we can't do. And most of it's voluntary. You know, the way that the kit that I want to work with rules out 90% of possibilities that other people have. You know, voluntarily, it's all about limiting what you can do. And every time you are limited, that's a possibility to do something different. So I don't think we've ever, you know, Denzil's never called me with, like, rung me up and said, this has happened, we can't do this. We don't have moments where we go, oh no, then we're in trouble. It's always, well, how are we going to do it? And the more we can't do, the more, as filmmakers, the more you have to use the one thing that's different to everybody else, which is your sort of imagination and ingenuity to get around those problems. And we had a real clear instance of that when we came back to shoot it after the pandemic had all kicked off. We had there's a scene in a chapel which had 200 extras in it, and it was like, well, we can't have 200 extras. And so the question was, well, what do we do? And it was like, well, we have no extras. and we change location. We don't have a big chapel, 200 extras. We have a small chapel with no extras. And suddenly that scene in the film is one of my favorite scenes. And now that would have never happened without the pandemic. And I don't want a global pandemic just before I shoot a film every time, but something comes up that stops you from doing something. It's a possibility to do something that you wouldn't have thought about, because filmmaking's reactive. If I was given all of the money and all of the tools and all of the possibilities to make film, I wouldn't do anything. It's what you can't do makes you think about what you can do. And there's another example with Bait. A few weeks before we were going to shoot, or a couple of months before we were going to shoot Bait, we lost a load of finance, and we had to decide to cut something. And what we cut was one of the boats. So originally in Bait, both of the brothers had boats. And we had to lose one. So Martin, the protagonist, we cut his boat, which meant he was a fisherman without a boat who was fishing with a net off the beach. That's the whole heart of the film. I never would have thought, I didn't think about that when I was writing the script. That was out of necessity because we'd lost 30 grand or something. We're going to have to cut this. And so it totally transformed the film, not through any thought on my part other than, shit, what do we do? He can't have a boat. Suddenly people are going this. Suddenly we had a character who you could sum up in a line. He's a fisherman without a boat. It's like, amazing, So I think it's constantly compromising, but being constantly compromising because you're being limited, but being in control of those compromises. We get told we can't do this, so we put our heads together and go, what are we going to do? And we make a decision and we go on that route until something else happens, and you just go and go and go like that. And the brilliant thing with what you did with this film is, after Bait, people were saying, can we fund can we get involved with your next film? And we just wanted to go again on a small film and try and privately finance it. So we were saying to people, no, we don't want anything. But then Film 4 said, after a couple of emails, said, come in and have a meeting. We went in, and me and Denzil went in there thinking, we're not, it's going to be great to meet with Film 4, but we don't, for this film, we don't want any support because we just want to get going. And so we were able to go in there with the confidence to say, them to say, what do you want? And we go, we don't want anything. And because we're just going to make it, and we're going to be in control of it. And they said, well, fine, make it, be in control of it, and we'll pay for it. And we were like, all right. And and it was absolutely perfect, and that was our compromise. We compromised by accepting their money.
That sounds like a tough compromise, that one. Before I throw it open to the audience, I'd like to talk about the unique way that you use sound. It's a very important aspect of the film. A radio is almost like the second biggest character in the movie. Definitely tells us something about what's going on very early in the picture. Can you talk about sound and how you use it?
Yes, I love doing the sound. I love doing the sound design. I'm quite a control freak. I think and I'm not ashamed of that. I've still got my childhood joy of that I feel when I'm doing all aspects of filmmaking. So I want to write it, shoot it, edit it. I wrote the theme tune. I
Sung the theme tune.
I did sing it on this one. There is a bit of me singing on this.
Not the nice voice at the end.
No, the auto-tuned bit in the middle, and also, and because of the camera I use, it's clockwork. It's not a sync camera. It's very noisy. So as soon as I started using that camera, I knew that I was never going to be able to record dialogue in these big close-ups. So I just thought, I just won't record any location sound. I'd do it like I did when I was a kid, when I'd shoot a roll of Super 8, send it off to Switzerland or wherever it went. 2 weeks later, it would come back. I'd put it on the projector. I'd watch it, and then I'd get my tape recorder, and then I'd make some sounds or a soundtrack, and then I would project it on the wall, and I'd press play on the projector, and I'd press play on the tape player, and show it to the audience, which was my mum, that way. And I thought that was that was joyful. Why don't I just go back to making films in that way? And the other thing with sound is it's so cheap to do. When you're on a shoot, every minute has got a cost, and you're constantly communicating with people, and it's stressful, and you're always behind, and you're always thinking about a million different things. So by cutting out all of the sound until later, I can then be in my studio and do the Foley, the score, the picture edit all at the same time. It is a bit like a sort of one-man band setup where I stand on a bit of wooden flooring in my studio that's off the real floor. It's like floorboards, and I record the footsteps as I'm watching the picture, and plus I've got my synthesizer and tape loop, and I can try tape loop stuffs while I'm doing the picture. So I can do it all at the same time, and it's so cheap, the post-production sound. And by recording no location sound, there's nothing to mend. A lot of low-budget film, the first thing you do when you're doing the audio is you go into the studio and you start by mending stuff. You shot something that's supposed to be set in the 16th century, and you're trying to remove the sound of a helicopter off the dialogue track. So it's the first thing you do is start mending stuff, and it's such a bad starting point for a creative process. Whereas I love to go in with no sound at all, and I just add in what I want. So I could make it naturalistic. So if I shot this scene silently, we could all come in and post-sync our dialogue. Then I could put in the sound of the fan. I could put sound a bit of chitter-chatter in the back, maybe the sea, people talking over there. And the beginning of the scene might be naturalistic, but during the scene, I can just remove all of these other elements till it's just us talking in absolute dead space. And suddenly you've created like a sonic close-up. That to do visually is complicated. To do it sonically is really easy. And also you can unnerve people with audio without them knowing what's happening. So you can make a naturalistic sound bed, and maybe like the ticking clock is just ticking a bit too quick. And when you're watching it, you can't identify what's wrong with what's going on, but you're slightly unnerved. You don't quite know what it is. And to do that visually is obvious. You put something slightly uncanny visually and you go, there's an uncanny thing. And you can rationalize it. Some people do it beautifully, and they're the famous moments where something in a scene is like, you're going, oh God, what is that? Recent example like from Hereditary with the person in the roof, where you suddenly start to notice it. But they're one in a million, those scenes visually. But to do it with audio, it's really a lot easier to do. And that David Lynch is the master of it. Just slowing something down a little bit, and you don't know why you're feeling uncomfortable, but you are. So, yeah, the audio, for somebody who's so obsessed with the visuals, the audio for me is much more important than the visuals. The potential to unsettle people is on the soundtrack. And just to quickly say, the radio, the radio is a real key thing, because to hold the audience's attention, whether it does or not, it's up to the audience members to decide. But for 90 minutes of a woman effectively on her own, I didn't want Mary's character to be somebody who wandered around the island going, oh, I'm going to walk around, what's going on here? Oh, why is the stone not made a sound this time? So I didn't want to fall into that trap, but I needed devices for exposition. So the two things are the book, which is just a really stark vehicle of exposition, and then the radio, which is just pure exposition. But the thing with exposition is you got to have it, but you got to disguise it. You got to give the audience something to look at there whilst they're being fed a load of facts here. So that's why when she talks into the radio, you don't very rarely see your face. It's all shot from behind, so that there's a mystery to it. So these facts can be spoken, but you can't quite key into it. The other thing with the radio is it's a real safety net, because I knew that if it was too oblique or I needed to get a bit more exposition in, I could always just cut to a close-up of the radio and write some dialogue for Mary to say, and it would help us out, which we did. A lot of the radio close-ups were shot afterwards in our house. Just we got the radios back and just shot lots of stark close-ups, which were then used as visuals to put other sound over the top. So that's the other thing is, when we wrap the shoot, it hasn't finished. There's still going to be a lot that happens afterwards, and it's not about reshoots. It's not about getting all the actors back in, the art department back in, caterers, everybody back in. It's about going, right, I've got these cutaways. let's write some more dialogue to put in. Maybe let's have another radio report. Let's change the radio report. Let's, add and something that Jason Wood picked up on. The first person to pick up on it was my Radio On homage within the film, which is the football scores being read out. That was a sort of late thought, and I just did that's me reading the football scores. And I just thought about that in the studio. I thought, I'm going to put that in, and suddenly, I don't have to ring Denzil and say, "Oh, we're doing a reshoot. We've got to get everybody back together." It's just I can try it. If it doesn't work, I'd get rid of it. If it works, then it stays in. So
it also allowed you to re-record the radio broadcast where you talk about the island of Enys Men.
Yeah, I did a guide bit of I mispronounced the name of my own film.
And before we move on, now you mention those football scores, I was thinking as I was watching, these are some strange team names, and also,
How dare you?
are you making up these scores, or did you actually go to 1973 to find some scores?
They're all genuine football scores from roughly that Saturday at the end of the 1973 season. One liberty
the film takes place in April and ends on the 1st of May.
Yeah. I took one liberty, which our home team is Mousel AFC, the greatest football team in the world. Narrowly missed out on
Champions League.
By 873 places. Narrowly missed out on promotion this year, but what a great season. They weren't technically in that league, but so I promoted them a couple of divisions because of my film. And they beat Penzance 4-0 in an imaginary game. All the other scores are genuine. And Ed, who plays the boatman, who was always also the lead in Bait, he said that on Friday when he was there watching the film for the first time, with 800-900 people or whatever it was, he said it was the proudest moment was hearing St. Blasey and Nampian and St. Austell and all these great Cornish names being read out, and he said that was the bit that really got him.
We have not so much time, but I'd always love to hear from you if you have any questions. There's a mic coming around. Does anyone want to ask any of our panel a question? Yep. There's a mic coming around. There's no more COVID. We can pass the mic around, apparently.
You talked about your influences. What are your influences when you're working, film-wise or art-wise? What drives you, and what particular ones were in the mood board of this film?
I think to start with, there's constant influences, the ones that I always go back to. Specifically for this, for the colour, like I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, and they knew the director. It's like Jean Rollin, French porn director. I haven't seen any of his porn films, but what he did was every few years he would make these sort of vampire films. He was a real auteur who used his sort of porn career to make money, to make these kind of amazing, mostly vampire films. And the BFI have got them all. They're on BFI Player, which is why I feel fine talking about this, because the BFI have sort of given it the stamp of okay. So, but just the way he uses colour, and I think I don't know what film stock they were shot on, but the colours are so amazing. And like just looking at those films, and there's a lot of blood in them, and the way the red is just fantastic. And the analog red we see here, that dot on the door or whatever. I don't like digital's fantastic and everything, but I don't think you get proper reds with digital that I've seen. Whereas film, you get this incredible red. So he was a big influence because he just he used colour and he used loads of colour. So visually, that was a reference. When I'm shooting, it's always Bresson, and that's not copying the way he shoots or whatever, but just keep it simple. Work out the simplest way to do it and just do it, because the shoot's a nightmare. It's just you have this amazing plan and then you start You know, it's like day one, action, everything goes to shit. Which is great, because all of these possibilities present themselves. The thing that you've written on paper suddenly becomes totally unattainable, and that means all of these other opportunities arise, but you can't get excited by that. You've got to stay in control, and it's constantly. I hear Scorsese saying, "What would Bresson do?" and Bresson saying, "Keep it simple." It's like that sort of lineage of, you know, just keep it as simple as possible. It's why the compositions are simple. It's why the shots are simple. It's why the camera doesn't move unnecessarily. And then I think the opposite happens when I go into the edit, which is like, right now, keep it as complicated as possible. Because you've got very simple shots, now create something that's much more impressionistic, that's much more in keeping with the way that my mind works, the dream state, the unconsciousness. So I suppose then the reference would be Nicholas Roeg, and just those first 3 films by Nick Roeg, and Bad Timing as an example of quite how far you can go. And I'd never thought about that before, but that's clarified it in my head for me. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah. No more? Oh yeah, here we go.
Denzil, can you say something about working with this creative energy? Are you going with the flow? Are you hanging on? How are you recalibrating the type of decisions that we've heard talked about?
Whilst in the shoot, you mean, or just
whilst
generally?
in the shoot, in the run up to the shoot, and you know, Mark has an idea, and you go, oh right, okay, yeah, we can accommodate that, or you know, partnership, creative, go with the flow. What's the?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess go with the flow works. So it's not something that I've really thought about that much, because I'm too busy thinking about what it is that we're doing and what's coming next and what's after that and all the contingencies around it. So I guess I'm in the flow. Yeah.
In the flow, great.
Can I just say something about Denzil, without blowing too much smoke towards you, but the most amazing, I don't really know a lot of what Denzil does, because he's the type of producer who never tells me anything unless I need to know it, which is as a director, is absolutely priceless. So I find out things afterwards, you know, it's like...
We're going to Cannes.
Yeah. When? You know, and we'll say, well, that was a good day at the end of the day, and then sort of go, yeah, it was great, and then I'll hear from somebody else later on that, you know, like the unit base burnt down or something, but he keeps any kind of drama, he keeps it from me, so I don't quite know how he does it. You know, again, so I am blowing smoke now, but thanks.
Poker face.
All right.
And just before we go, don't look now. And what is the double bill? No. I don't know the answer myself.
The Wicker Man.
Ah.
It was because it was a double bill, because it was felt that both films were not very good. So that's why the Wicker Man, the cut that everybody's seen is so short, because it was the B feature, wasn't it? And
It was.
I was gonna say 73 minutes long. That might not be right. I'd be obsessed. It's like 80 minutes or something.
Yeah, you definitely didn't make this film for a Chinese audience. 7, it should be 8, right?
Yeah, well. I mean, is that a market? I don't think commercially.
They love bait. Mark, Mary, Denzil, thank you so much. The film is amazing. He paid me to say that. And wonderful. Is it on again?
Yep.
No, it's not, is
isn't it?
Tuesday.
They missed it. Is it Tuesday? What time? See, this is what you're a producer.
Well, not entirely sure.
Oh, yeah. So look at the Cannes program. You can catch it on Tuesday. It's well worth watching just for the grain and the color. It will be released by the BFI do we know, later this year?
Later this year, yeah. Not sure.
Not sure. Brilliant. Tell all your friends to watch it. And if not, tell someone else. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Kaleem.
Kaleem.